This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on political consensus in India on Doklam standoff. The participants are Skand Ranjan Tayal, former diplomat, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist.
How India and China have locked horns in Bhutan at the Doklam Plateau, where China has intruded into Bhutan and India has asked China to take its troops back, and China is trying to build a road in that small little area which overlooks part of India and part of Bhutan. Mr. Tayal, how do you see the present situation panning out? How do we go ahead from here?
One has to look at the background a little bit, that China's policy in the last decade has been to gradually expand in all directions and change the facts on the ground, gradually, incrementally, and they are not challenged and they are getting away with it. We see this in South China Sea, for instance, that so many rocks they have converted into islands, and now there are air bases on that and ports, so the whole thing is of militarization. Now, this is the same broad policy which now they are executing against a small country like Bhutan. It is very clear that this Tri-Junction area is an area on which there is no agreement between Bhutan and China. And China is trying to change the facts on the ground by building that road. When there has been a clear understanding between Bhutan and China in their own negotiations, that status quo will continue till they agree on what exactly is the international border between Bhutan and China. And on 16 June, the construction work started in Bhutanese territory by the Chinese crew. Then the Bhutanese patrol first told them not to do it. And then the Bhutanese, of course, consulted us. And India and Bhutan, as listeners know, we had a treaty and we have an understanding, and there is a very clear phrase in that India and Bhutan will closely with each other on issues relating to their national interests. And this Tri-Junction, where China is trying to take away Bhutan's territory, vitally affects India's security interests, because if you look at the map, it will become very clear. It's like a dagger at the heart of Siliguri corridor, and it vitally affects India's security, and that's why India had to take this stand.
So China and Bhutan have had 24 rounds of negotiations in the past 3 decades. They've not been able to resolve this. How do you see, why now, why did China take this step now? Militarily, or is it a pressure point? Why did it take this step now?
This is a policy of the Chinese gradually to expand in all areas. Now, why they have taken it now? I think in the last 1 year or so, relations between India and China have deteriorated, despite the best efforts of Prime Minister Modi and the government, and some of our main interests have been vitally affected by the Chinese stand. No nuclear suppliers group was alright, one position, but their repeated help to Pakistan on Masood Azhar issue, where terrorism is a very emotional issue with the government of India, with the whole world, and they are backing Pakistan. Then again, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, it goes to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is our territory, when China is very sensitive to its own territorial claims, whether it is Taiwan, whether it is other islands with Japan, or they have shown total insensitivity towards Indian concerns, and whether we should see it in that context or in a broader context, but we should try to limit the differences to this area, and it will be better for both India and China not to link it to other wider issues, because some of them are intractable. But here, this issue is resolvable very easily. China should stop constructing that road, and Indian troops will withdraw, which is really Bhutanese territory, and Bhutan's interests will be protected.
Sir, it is almost a month now that the troops of two armies are standing almost eyeball to eyeball at an altitude of around 10,000 feet. Both sides are saying, diplomatically, we are in touch. We know it that Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping in Hamburg on the sidelines of the G20 event. We are also told that officials on both sides have been talking to each other on how to defuse the crisis. How do you see, diplomatically, how should this pan out further?
China, if one sees the statements from the Chinese official media, they have been quite aggressive. Even their statements by their official spokesperson have been quite categorical and aggressive. Whereas from the Indian side, they have been very, very restrained. And I believe that government is very clear that this issue can be resolved diplomatically. Recently, Foreign Secretary Jaishankar had spoken at Singapore, where he made a very good comment that differences have been there, but in the past we have been able to resolve them in the sense that differences don't become disputes, and that is the direction in which Government of India is moving. And it is fortuitous and I think very timely or by coincidence that NSA Mr. Dobal will be going to Beijing on 26th of July for a meeting of the BRICS NSAs, and he is also the special representative for the border talks. And this issue also really is a border issue. I am very confident and optimistic that perhaps this will be resolved in some way by July end, and both sides will be able to save face and avoid any further dispute.
Mr. Tayal, do you think that China was trying to show to the world that this argument it is having on the border is with India and not with tiny Bhutan, because it will give it a bad name to China if it is having an argument with tiny little Bhutan, which has probably no army worth its name? The population of Bhutan would be equal to China's army probably. And would it give China a bad name if it comes out in the world that this is Bhutan? Slowly it is coming out that the issue is with Bhutan. So did China try to focus on India and keeping out Bhutan so that the global image goes that this is an India-China dispute?
I think China did not expect such a quick reaction by Indian army. First of all, immediately we were sensitized by the Bhutanese that this is happening, and we were able to deploy 100 persons who executed this face-off. But we have to make it clear to the world and all the embassies, countries through our embassies, that China is really trying to bully Bhutan, and India is just trying to come to the assistance of Bhutan because it's a tiny country. And as China has been able to bully Philippines and so many other small countries in the South China Sea area, where they are towing the Chinese line, and we at least have our treaty obligations, our agreements, our history, our old friendship with Bhutan, and we have to stand by Bhutan, and we have to educate the world that this is an attempt by China to bully a small country like Bhutan and encroach on its territory.
Sir, in India yesterday at New Delhi, Mr. Rajnath Singh, the Home Minister, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Sushma Swaraj, addressed leaders of the opposition parties, told them details, showed them maps, satellite imagery, we are told, was shown to the leaders that where do we stand. After the meeting, the opposition parties have come out saying that they stand by the government in its stand against China. Diplomatically, how does this help?
It is very important that the whole country is united in this episode again with the issue and with the government. And it is very timely, and it should be done more frequently. And on other issues also, that when there is a national interest involved, there is some dispute, differences with another country. And in the media, all kinds of misinformation is also being fed. And here I would like to say that this is a Chinese strategy to wage a media war and to wage a psychological war. And unfortunately, some of our eminent writers, commentators sometimes fall victim to it. And they get carried away and try to put the blame on India, which is very unfortunate. But India is a free country. We have a free press, so it is part of the game. But in this context, the responsible political parties, they should all speak with one voice and stand by the government. It is very clear that the government has to explain what exactly is happening. And many of the things do not fully really come into the media. They have to be done on a confidential basis. It's a very good stand, and the opposition parties have also taken a stand in favor of Indian national interests. And a very strong message will go to China in two ways. That their attempts through some commentators in the media to divide the public opinion in India will fail, and the whole country, where the will of the country is represented through their elected representatives, through the political parties, through the members of parliament, stands united behind the government.
So in the past decade or so, all the standoffs India and China has had along the LAC, which is undemarcated, as our listeners would be aware, have been taken the diplomatic route and not the gun route. Each time diplomacy has prevailed over the bayonets. You think this time also the same thing will happen?
I am fairly confident that a way will be found, and the way is very clear. China should stop making the road and Indian troops will withdraw. And if I also feel that China would not like that it becomes a hot issue and some bullets are fired, because since 1986 really there has been peace and tranquility on the border, and as in the official statement it was said that this state has come after a longer effort, and if it is disturbed once, then it will have enormous ramifications both for India, China and the world.
So diplomatically, since you people have dealt with countries, our friendly countries, enemy countries, opposing countries, there's so many variations of our relations with these countries. Since you people as IFS officers deal with these countries, how difficult is it dealing with China?
China has a very long-term vision and a long-term plan. What they do, what their objective is, that they think of 10 years, 15 years down the line. And the whole establishment, media, party, diplomats, journalists, everybody speaks from the same voice. And whatever they say, we have to take it seriously. And whenever there is an agreement with them, it should be taken in writing. Because privately, sometimes they agree to something and later they resile from that stand. It is difficult to negotiate with them, but ultimately they also respect if the other country takes a stand and if they have some principles on which they abide.
Sir, going back to the political stand which our government has taken and the opposition parties have backed it, that we will continue to stay where we are in Bhutan until China stops the construction of the road and goes back to where it was, rather restore status quo ante. You think this stand as taken by the government and the political parties united, how does it change the dynamics vis-a-vis China's policy to us? Because China has been saying a lot of things, accusing everybody from Pandit Nehru to down below. Does it change, bring in a united stand of India against China?
Chinese statements, and particularly two articles in Global Times of 4th of July, 10th of July, have been very, very belligerent. They have threatened to teach India a lesson. It is part of the psychological warfare and it should be taken as such. But it is important that India stands united as a country, and a very clear message would have gone to China. I'm sure they would have understood it and would have studied it very clearly, that if they push India too hard, India will not retract. It can lead to a very serious situation.
So going into the specifics of the Doklam Plateau, there's a 6.2 kilometer gap in understanding of our situation. We say the tri-junction is at one point, which is north from the present point. China says it's Gemuchen, we say it's Batangla to be specific. It's a 6.2 kilometer gap. You think this will be a short-term piece, or do we have to demarcate this point? And will China agree to the Batangla tri-junction, or will we keep on pressing for a southernmost point at Gemuchen?
This treaty goes back to 1890, and after that the demarcation has taken place, which perhaps is not very right, because the principle agreed was the watershed principle. And it is very clear that if that watershed principle is followed, then the tri-junction should be Batangla, which is about 6 kilometers north of what the Chinese are claiming. So ultimately, it is settlement has to be on the basis of some principle. And since the principle of the water flow has been followed all over that sector, then this needs to be discussed, and this should be part of the special representatives' talks in future.
Sir, when Bhutan and China were discussing to start off with, we were part of the talks. Why did we leave the talks then?
Bhutan is a sovereign country, and the Bhutan-China border is quite long. And only this tri-junction in this part India is concerned. Otherwise in the north, and there is a huge border. So perhaps in that context it was seen that the main border discussions are between Bhutan and China, with only a small part where India also comes in this tri-junction area.
Sir, very quickly, India also has a stand with China that is ready to demarcate the LAC. Prime Minister Modi made an official statement in September 2014 when President Xi was visiting here, saying that we are ready to demarcate the LAC. Why has China not agreed to it in these 3 years?
Very strangely, China has not even clearly given its claim on LAC, or what exactly is the line of actual control. What we are asking, that whatever you say, at least say that this is the line of actual control and this is what where the Chinese troops are. But they are claiming even those areas where the Chinese presence is not there as their part of LAC. So this is just a ruse so that everything is kept open, and it only hampers a solution to this India-China border problem.
The government and the opposition parties have united hands against the stand we have taken against China and Bhutan, where China has tried to intrude into Bhutanese territory, build a road. India has told China to back off, and only then the standoff, armed troops standing eyeball to eyeball on the Doklam Plateau will end. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on political consensus in India on Doklam standoff. The participants were Skand Ranjan Tayal, former diplomat, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.